just a matter of diving into the research and just looking for something that speaks to me, some kind of hook. Often it starts with Wiktionary. It's the dictionary that's run by the Wikimedia Foundation. The advantage there is that they have translations of a ton of these words in different languages. Often they're pretty random. Icelandic tends to be there a lot, which is kind of cool, and Finnish. Some of my favorites are Greek as well, and just a ton of different languages around the world. And then you can kind of get a sense of how many different ways there are to express things in language. And so I just start with a root word, for example, imerensis, which is the feeling that you don't understand why someone loves you. As hard as you can to wrap your mind around the idea, it's just impossible to understand. So I found the Latin root immerens, which means undeserving. And so I just sort of expanded out from there to imerensis. That usually is a good way to start. And then once I find a hook like that, then I can dive into real dictionaries in those languages and try to piece something together in a creative way. But often, that's not quite enough, and I have to get creative in other ways. And so there's a lot of wordplay involved there too. I have another definition called ticklock, which is the feeling that you don't know how much time you have left on this earth, and so that one is actually an acronym for the insatiable crocodile hunts what's left of Captain Hook. So it's a reference to Peter Pan, but also the word itself, ticklock, kind of refers to the word as well. So I can get pretty deep into the wordplay nerdery often. The first step in my process is to, when I come up with a feeling, to try to make sure that there isn't already a word for it. And that'll frequently happen because a lot of languages around the world are actually really rich in in their vocabulary of language. There's a Japanese word, mono no aware, which is a sense of the transience of things and how beautiful that can be. Or Ubuntu, I am because we are. It's such a universal concept. And so sometimes the work is already done, but often language is limitless. We can always expand the palette. There are lots of synonyms that are redundant. So sometimes I decide, it's worth it. I'm gonna try to define my own take on transience. And so in this book, that's actually the last definition in the book. I called it tiris, which is the awareness of the impermanence of absolutely everything, and the comfort of that, and also how disturbing that thought can be. And so tiris, from my end, is derived from Tir na nog, which is sort of in Irish folklore, the land of everlasting youth and beauty. So I'm often asked if these words are real, and that's been the dominant question, at least at first, that I would get from readers. And my answers evolved over time. Initially, it was like, well, no, of course they're not real. I just made them up. You're not going to find these words in any other dictionary. But over the years, it occurred to me, I defined a definition called sonder. It's the awareness of that everyone around you is the main character of their own story. And to you, they're just extras in the background. That definition, sonder, in particular, caught on in a way that none of the others have yet. And so often I'll run into sonder being used in earnest online, or even I've overheard it in conversations in a cafe next to me, someone using the word sonder. And to me, that it kind of changed everything to me, because we just tend to accept the words that we are given in life. The words we use to build our lives were handed to us in the crib, or picked up on the playground. But once you realize that all of our words were basically made up, they're all made up. the word robot didn't exist until someone made it up, and now that's part of our parlance. Dr. Seuss invented the word nerd because he needed a rhyme. And we don't tend to question the reality of those words because they just become, part of the architecture of our lives. And I think, if anything, that is a little bit of a problem, is that we take words too seriously. We allow our words to define us. But I think the natural order of things is that we define words. And so we imbue them with meaning. We pour ourselves into them. That is how it should be. We are the ones that mean something. And ultimately, all words are made up. I truly believe that, and not just in emotion, but in just in language in general. There are certain parts of the world that have been defined quite well. I'd say, physical and visible reality, the tangible stuff around us that was named, back when we were still cavemen, sketching on walls. Some of the first things that we would have come up with words for were, bison herds and hunting strategies and spears and all these physical things. And that was by necessity. But the really deep parts of ourselves, the emotions, that would have to come later, and it would take great effort to actually extract some of those things and to find the commonalities between us, because I sincerely believe that nobody is alone in how they feel. That there are no emotions in this book or anywhere that are only ever felt by one person. And so it's just a matter of, typically it's just a matter of, going a long way around and trying to haul these buried objects from the bottom of a very muddy lake. That's what it often feels like when you're trying to express an emotion. And so I think there's a lot of space there for language to expand in terms of the intangible things, the metaphysical, the non-physical. And I think that's the most exciting part of this period in history, when it seems that we have just in the last 200 years, I'd say, we've discovered each other's vulnerability and our own humanity. And so now is the time, I think, to define the world as we see it. And that's a far more complex and multifaceted and delicate world. According to linguists, is the most commonly understood word in the world. And so one would naturally assume that of all words, that surely must be the most real that we have. But then you look into its origins, and it emerged on the scene in 1840, and over the next couple decades, slowly started to take over, almost like an early meme. But ultimately, nobody really knows what those two letters are supposed to stand for. It could have been a fad in Boston in 1840, and it stands for all correct. Both of those words are misspelled. Or it could be from a presidential campaign, also from 1840. We don't really know. Or it could be borrowed from one of a dozen other languages around the world. That could be the origin as well. So we don't know what okay really means, even though it is the realest word we have. And if that's true of the realest word we have, then the dominoes start to fall as to the legitimacy of language. And I think there's something empowering about that how the mighty can fall. And it's a reminder that all words are made up, and they don't have to have any more meaning than we give them. We're the ones who make them real. I think of words as basically no more or less real than constellations in the sky. They're useful to a fault. Orion exists because we say it does, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. In many other cultures, they connect the dots very differently. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's up to us to connect the dots however we want, and discard the patterns that previous generations have given us. Take other words like love, for example, which perhaps are now too broad and too hard to pin down because they mean too many different things. So possibly if you just try to cut it out of your vocabulary or think deeper about it and go the long way around, I think it can be a very empowering thing. So the first one is nictus. Nictus is an adjective. Feeling quietly overjoyed to be the only one awake in the middle of the night, sitting alone with a laptop and a cup of tea, or strolling down the center line of an abandoned street, taking in the world like an empty theater between productions, stripped down to a simple black box, open to be whatever you want it to be. Nictus derives from Nictus cereus. It's a genus of cactus that blooms only at night. Here's one called carile. Noun. The sorrow of imagining the wealth of knowledge forever lost to history, knowing we'll never hear the language of the Etruscans, the battle cry of the Sea Peoples, or the burial chants of the Neanderthals. That we'll never read any more than a fragment of the works of Blake, Sappho, Aristotle, or Jesus, or enjoy the untold treasures of so many burned libraries and forgotten oral traditions and unrecorded songs, any of which might have made up the cornerstone of the canon that we'd all be able to quote by heart and couldn't imagine living without. Carile is a contraction of Kerguelen Islands, which are equidistant between Australia, Antarctica, and Madagascar. But it's a sunken microcontinent that was lost thousands of years ago, 20 million years ago. It was once huge. It was 3 times the size of Japan, but it was covered in dense forests and, nameless animals and possibly even people that we will never know existed. It's all just lost between the waves, lost beneath the waves. Suerza, noun. A feeling of quiet amazement that you exist at all, a sense of gratitude that you were even born in the first place, that you somehow emerged alive and breathing despite all odds, having won an unbroken streak of reproductive lotteries that stretches all the way back to the beginning of life itself. Suerza is from the Spanish suerte, which is luck, and fuerza, which is force. So it's luck force, basically. And here's hemjawed. It's an adjective. Feeling trapped inside your own language, struggling to shake away the baggage weighing down certain words, unable to break out of its age-old structures and melodies, frustrated that the scattering of verbal pigments on its palette could never quite capture the colors in your head. And hemjawed is from hem, which is an attempt to clear the throat, and jaw, which means coarse babble. This is povism. It's noun. The frustration of being stuck inside your own head, unable to see your face or read your body language in context, only ever guessing how you might be coming across, which makes you think of yourself as a detached observer squinting out at a lushly painted landscape, but everyone else you seem woven right into the canvas. Povism is from point of view and ism, canopsia, the eeriness of places left behind. You can sense it when you move out of a house, noticing just how empty a place can feel. Walking through a school hallway in the evening, an unlit office on a weekend, or fairgrounds out of season. They're usually bustling with life, but now lie abandoned and quiet. It's easy to forget that most of your memories happened in places that are still around, the walls mostly unchanged, carrying on in your absence. But the world you once knew and the people you still remember have long since moved on, replaced by so many others who have passed through these doors. It's almost impossible to imagine while you're still in it, knowing abstractly that the crowds will soon be gone, the lights shut off, the music silenced. If you spend enough time in a place, it becomes infused with a certain meaning, with specific memories soaked deep into every corner of the room. It's hard to imagine it could ever mean anything else. But soon enough, there will come a day when you pack up your things and walk through your house one last time, looking slowly around the rooms, thinking back on everything that happened here, which makes it feel not just empty, but hyper empty, with a total population in the negative, whose inhabitants are so conspicuously absent, they glow like neon signs. And not a day after you leave, it'll become someone else's new home, a blank canvas they'll fill up with their own memories, burying the life you built in a fresh coat of paint, leaving nothing but echoes of what was once here. Maybe that's why we want to believe in ghosts. Maybe it's just a fantasy that our memories are so powerful, they'll leave a mark on the wall that would mean something to someone else and can't just be painted over. We just want to mark our time here, to keep the rooms filled and the memories alive. If our houses ever feel haunted, it'll be because we're haunting them ourselves, trying to revisit all the places we once knew, as if there was something still there for us, something we forgot, as if there were ever such a thing as unfinished business. Kenopsia derives from the ancient Greek keno, which is emptiness, and opsia, which is seeing. So it's seeing emptiness.